Hi friends, thank you for watching The Source, God's Answers to Life's Hard Questions. Today I have a special guest, Rabbi Shmuel Reichman. Rabbi Reichman is a best-selling author, international speaker, and the founder and CEO of Self-Mastery Academy. He has lectured internationally on topics of Torah thought, Jewish medical ethics, psychology, as well as leadership. His best-selling book, The Journey to Your Ultimate Self, well, it keeps getting sold out, and after reading it, I certainly know why. He also holds a coaching certification from Robbins Medanis training, like in Tony Robbins, and has spent his life researching psychology, spirituality, philosophy, and leadership. He is currently pursuing a PhD at the University of Chicago. I'm very happy to have him here today. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rabbi Shmuel Reichman. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, testing 1, 2, 3. How are you?
Baruch Hashem, how you doing?
Good. So we finally got this together. I am so happy. Okay, so we're going to start. You ready?
Ready.
I have to tell you that I am now in a shortage of Post-its. This is just the Post-its from Shabbos because you can't do anything else but that. But there's so many notes. It's great. I love it. Okay. So actually, let's start with the title of your book. First of all, let me just speak about my perception of this book. I could consider it, in my estimation, and you'll tell me after what you call it, a self-help book, but really like the Tony Robbins of the Jewish world. That's how I look at you. And what I loved about this book is because a lot of self-help books, it's all in the title, and then they torture you for 300 pages just like saying the title. This book, every page, every chapter stands on its own. It builds upon itself. You can't just like, oh, the journey to self, now I know the book. No, you got to read this book. And at the end of the book, I'm not there yet, but I'm 2/3 in. I don't think you're quite the same person as when you started. And that's fantastic. That's my perception. And I didn't get any kickbacks for this, just for the audience. So the title of the book, The Journey to Your Ultimate Self. What is the ultimate self? Who says so? Why do we have to agree with you? What is the ultimate self?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? So I'll just take you a little back in terms of why I wrote the book. So I was a normal kid. I wasn't intending on trying to change the world, inspire the world. Definitely wasn't intending to write books or books on deeper Jewish thought and wisdom and inspiration, self-development. And like personally, my life fell apart. Like when I was 18 years old, my life fell apart, got my heart broken. I was facing like these near-death experiences. And for the first time in my life, I began to ask real questions. Like, what's the purpose of life? Why am I here? What am I capable of? And what is Torah really about? Like, what is, like, when it comes to Torah, there's the surface level of what we do. That's halacha, that's Jewish law. But then there's the inner dynamics of why, like, what's the purpose of it all? And I began to ask everyone and anyone and read and research and talk to everyone who was making an impact in the world. And the answer to your question, which really is the foundation of the entire book, like every single page, every single chapter is designed to be a gateway into something life-changing, profound, paradigm-shifting, something that really makes you rethink, think, and rethink again, again, and again. But as you'll notice, there's one idea that comes up all the time throughout the entire book. And it's based on a Gemara, based on a piece of Talmud, and Nida Daf Lamed Amud Beis, that says when we were in the womb, we learned to Kol Torah Kula, all of the Torah, and just before we were born, this malach, this angel, hits us on the mouth and we forget everything. So the question that everyone asks is, what's the purpose of teaching in the first place if we're going to forget it? What's going on here? So the Vilna Gaon explains that this Torah is not just Chumash, it's not just the Bible, it's not just learning the surface level of Torah, it's the purpose of reality. You are being taught why God, why Hashem created the world, but more importantly, you are being taught what your purpose is in the world, as in like literally who you are, what you're capable of becoming, and you don't forget it. You lose access to it. So the entire purpose of life is not becoming great or doing, kind of like this self-help, change the world type of thing. It's a very fundamental expression of self. The goal of life is to discover who you are, to actualize your dormant potential. And literally it's the journey to your ultimate self, to your true self. And as we go deeper into the book, you'll see that there's layers of self. So marriage is recreating a shared self, a shared relationship between husband and wife. The whole Jewish people are one self. God is the source of all self. That's why the Bali Machshava, the Jewish thinkers, talk about Hashem as the neshama shel neshamos, the soul of souls, the self of self, which is very philosophical, metaphysical. We don't have to start there right now. But the idea, and this is really, apropos to what you just mentioned, that the world of self-development is not separate from the world of wisdom. What makes science beautiful is it's sophisticated, abstract, interconnected. Everything affects everything. You learn, physics, quantum physics, psychology, philosophy, biology, chemistry. It's a system of real wisdom. And when it comes to self-development, a lot of people think it's fluff. It's inspiration and stories. When it comes to life, the real philosophy cannot be found in wisdom, in the wisdom of self-development. So the goal of this book is to do two things. Number one is to open up the inner wisdom of Torah, the inner deeper.
We'll get to those subjects. I have a lot of questions for you, but really to hone in on that question. So the goal to the ultimate self, if you would have to consolidate all those thoughts together, the goal to the ultimate self is getting to what? And pretty much
the journey to your ultimate self is essentially the journey back to your fetal self, which is essentially, it's becoming the real you. So as opposed to artificially crafting and molding yourself, so your spiritual development, your intellectual expansion, your emotional well-being, your physical health, your leadership goals, your relationship goals, financial success, the impact you have in the world, you're not just becoming someone, the goal of life is to become you. So Michelangelo,
you're going backwards. You're going back to what
you're going back to your root self. Exactly.
Can I ask you something? Why did the angel hit us on the mouth if he wanted to forget? We had to forget everything. Why didn't he hit us on the head? So
the Maharal explains. That's a good question. It's a powerful question. So and by the way, just a quick analogy, Michelangelo used to be asked, this is the first story in the book, every chapter is framed with a story. He used to be asked, how do you create these incredible sculptures? And he says, you see these incredible sculptures and you think I just create them. When you see this original slab of stone that I create the sculpture out of, you won't see just a slab of stone. I see the sculpture inside. And all I'm doing is I'm basically removing the surface to reveal the sculpture inside. And that's such a deep analogy for how growth really works, because true growth is just going deeper and deeper into yourself, removing, so to speak, mental and existential blockages. And essentially, it's a journey of self-awareness. It's just getting more in touch with yourself.
Okay.
Which is, so now in terms of your question of why the mouth, so the Maharal explains that all expression in the world is essentially, if you think, what do you do when you speak? When you speak, if you have a real thought, you're not talking about current events, you're talking about who you are, why you do what you do, your real struggles in life, your experiences, your identity, the sense of purpose you feel you have, it's very hard to put those into words. So when you express things into words, you're really taking, and Rabbi Kivitas talks about this a lot, when you express the infinite, the inner realm of your mind into words, you're limiting what's actually in your mind into something that's expressible, which is why it's fascinating. The Hebrew word for word is a davar, a milah, and a teva. Because what happens when you speak is you basically, milah is the cut, malay, you cut the infinite into something finite, you place it into a box, a teva is a box, that's essentially what a word is,
right.
And a davar, which is a word, is also a thing, right? You take the infinite, you cut it up, you put it into something limited, something finite, and it's just that, but it basically expresses the actual thought, but it's not the thought. And when you read or you hear someone speak, your goal is not to think that the word is what they're actually saying, but it's a medium of communication. And you use the medium of communication to get back to what was originally in their thoughts. So the Maharal says that why does the Malach hit you on the mouth? Why does the angel hit you in the mouth? Because hitting on the mouth is essentially giving the gift of speech, but it's the gift of speech, which is the expressor of that which is inaccessible, that also makes you lose access to who you really are. So essentially, it's coming into a physical world, a finite world, a world of speech and things where you can't see thoughts, you can't see the infinite, you can't see the spiritual. You have to
It's
access it.
constricted, but it's a mode of delivery. It's like
Exactly. So it's the very mode of delivery that you're being given that also blocks the access. And that's why you basically work backwards to you almost have to, and this is where like people who are very self-aware know that you have to somewhat remove yourself from words to really get access to that which is beyond words. Okay. So if you really want to get in touch with something deep, you have to spend time with yourself, get to know yourself, get to know how you work, how you think. And you have to, it's why Buddhists are very transcendental in the sense, meditating on your navel, removing yourself from this world, so to speak. It takes a stage of that. And that's why the real beauty of Torah is that our goal is not to transcend this world. Our goal is to transcend, to get back to the root, but then come fully down and manifest in, which is really living a harmonious life of thoughtful action, of real deep physical life, as opposed to just spiritual or just physical. We're living a spiritually physical life, a meaningfully physical life, which is a fascinating way of approaching it.
Okay, so let me ask you something. The journey, not a journey.
Okay, so I see the types of questions you're asking, and I like them. So
is there only one way? Is there only one way? Is your the journey the way to the ultimate self?
Well, I think the question is the answer, in the sense that a lot of what makes life meaningful is retroactively connecting the dots. So, for example, we're coming to Purim right now. And the Baalei Machshava, the Jewish thinkers, talk about the beauty of the Megillah's Esther, of the story of Purim, is that there's no open miracle. There's no open revelation of God. Hashem's name, God's name, isn't even mentioned once in the entire Megillah. The beauty and the miraculous nature of the Purim story is connecting all the pieces together and realizing the divine providence, the hashgacha, within the natural. How all of these random, seemingly happenstance circumstances, which should never happen, each one of them were required to create this incredible, incredible story where you see the Yad Hashem, the hand of God, you see the divine providence without there being an open revelation. So what that means is you have to literally write the story. And once you put all the pieces together, how Haman did this, and Vashti did this, and Esther did this, Mordechai did this, and Achashverosh couldn't sleep, and all these different pieces coming together, you're like, wow, that's literally the most incredible story. So the Baalei Machshava, the Jewish thinkers, say that you should write your own Megillah, as in you should write your own story. You should see, like, most people live in a present moment where they're kind of like working on their goals, struggling, going to their job, working on their marriage, working on the health, whatever it is. They're literally just living now. When you realize that you are literally the result of all of your decisions and all the things that happened to you, and that you made decisions to go to this place, to meet this partner, you didn't go in that direction, you went in this direction, this didn't work out, you thought this was the worst thing that ever happened to you. When you start to retroactively see how you became who you became, and how the worst things really turned into the best things, and how the mistakes turned into something that helped you, and how you learned and grew from these challenges, and how this just like small decision ends up opening up into a new opportunity, you start to realize how your story is literally the most incredible story, and how there's so much divine providence in your life. And then you get into the real paradox of free will and predestination, in the sense of,
my question,
which is getting to your question of, is there one way or is there not? So the real answer is that it's partially unanswerable, it's partially irrelevant. It's also partially a matter of perspective, because the self, as in who you really are at root, who you're capable of, that's static, right? But if you think of it as a physical journey, which it's not, it's much more an internal journey, but if you think of it as a physical journey, if you have any destination, there are multiple ways to get there. Now, there are fundamental trajectories in terms of how to do it, but you can go a circumvented route, you can go a long route, you can go a short route, you can go by sea, you can go by air. So the many different areas of yourself that you're trying to actualize, there is no one way to get there. The fundamental tools are the same: self-awareness, experience, guidance, learning, struggle, overcoming difficulty. Like those are the fundamental principles in place, but it's not that there's only one version of your story. There's you as you currently are, there's you as you're capable of becoming, and there's the incredible journey towards it, which, being that we have free will, there's going to be an infinite number of possible expressions of that journey, and it's not guaranteed that you're going to succeed.
Okay.
But the most important, and this is, by the way, the most important thing, is to give yourself permission to really go on that journey. Because a lot of people, they don't feel like they have a great story to tell. They don't feel like they have incredible potential. They don't feel like they can make a real impact on the world, make a real difference. They don't feel like they can have an incredible marriage, get incredible physical shape. They don't feel like they can intellectually grow to like great heights. They don't feel like they're capable of spiritual awareness. And a lot of that is the limiting belief of where your potential really lies. And once you say, like, I have extraordinary potential, and I don't, but a lot of it is that what happens is when we're inspired, like people might listen to this right now and say,
wait, let me interrupt you though, because I think that you were taking it in a way that I actually didn't mean. When I say the journey, is it always have to be through Judaism? Is the journey to the ultimate always an exploration for God? Or can we get there through Tony Robbins?
So that's a good question. So let me kind of go on to that's a very different question.
But that's okay, because I liked your answer to the question I did ask.
It's very related. So I'll answer that from like a couple layers. So in terms of the limitations of Tony Robbins, so I've studied many different areas of wisdom, many different religions. I've studied every different philosophies. I've studied many different schools and institutions as well. I've studied Tony Robbins very deeply. So the two problems with Tony Robbins in the sense that he does incredible work, and anyone who knows his work knows he's unbelievable. He's passionate. He helps people really, find a sense of motivation and drive to really succeed. Is that number one? There's no God in his universe. So in the Tony Robbins world, people love Tony Robbins. So they really, because, and he's a brilliant marketer. And the reason why he doesn't have God in his universe, he personally most probably believes in God. But he doesn't have a God in his universe because he's a brilliant marketer, and a lot of his clientele are not Jewish, they're not religious, they're atheists. So if there's a God in his universe, he's going to basically cut off a lot of potential income. So he doesn't have a God in his universe. But what happens is that people then connect to Tony. So people idolize him, they worship him, they literally want to be Tony. And he ends up becoming the God of his own universe and the God of everyone else's universe. So people literally worship him. Number two is that Tony is not a philosopher. He's not a thinker in that sense. He's a very brilliant thinker in what he does, but he's a tactician, he's a strategist. He works surface level in the sense that if you break down his system and analyze it, there's countless number of contradictions. It doesn't really work as a system of thought. As in any scientific system, any religious system, you don't want to have internal contradictions because that basically reveals its limitation, its fallacies. So my goal in infusing Tony Robbins, I use a lot of what he does, is essentially number one, connect people to something infinitely higher than themselves. So not me, but a higher source. Right. And number two is rooted in a higher system of thought, a real interconnected, harmonious, philosophically sound system, which isn't just strategic and surface level like a lot of self-help books are, but it's essentially an inspiring philosophical work of self-development. So that's what I was talking about before, which is that this book is really a machshava sefer. It's really a book on Jewish thought. It's on philosophy and mystical thought, deeper wisdom, but everything is framed with the goal of applying and living it. So as opposed to just a theoretical work of thought, the goal isn't to learn Torah, it's to live Torah. The goal is to live it. So why can't people go to other sources to take the journey to your ultimate self? So it's a loaded question, right? Because first of all, the question in general is, does everyone need to live a Torah life to live a life of truth? Is Torah the only path? That's
pretty much my question. You just asked the better question. That's what I meant.
So and by the way, it's very, let's take a step back because this will help frame it. So Abraham didn't have the Torah and he found God, right? Now, Shlomo HaMelech, Solomon, he was given all of Torah wisdom, and he was able to also then use that Torah wisdom to understand the whole physical world and the world of nature. So it seems that Avram went from the physical up to the spiritual, right? From this world, asked questions and found the higher source. And Solomon, went from the source, was able to come down and understand the whole physical world. So how does that work? So this is a very powerful paradigm shift for how to understand the physical world. There's an approach that the physical world was never created. We're just basically
the what of the physical world? I'm sorry.
The physical world. There's a theory that the physical world was never created.
Okay.
Right? Eternal world. Then there's a theory that there was a Big Bang, so the world was created, and whether someone created that, whether it's just the ongoing, boomerang, that's creation, recreation, etc. And then there's a theory that God created the world. But then there's also a deeper theory that God didn't just create the world, but this physical world is an expression of something higher. So when you look at a tree, it's an expression that came from a seed. You look at a fully grown human being, we're an expression of a zygote, right? Just a single, half male, half female genetic code. When you you have a projector, you go to a theater, you see the projection on the screen, that's coming out of a projector. So that's an emanation. It's not just a creation, it's an expression. And when you have an expression, you can understand the root from the expression. So you can understand what was in that original zygote by looking at the fully expressed human being. You can understand what was in that seed, the genetic component, and really just like the entire fundamental underlying component of the seed by looking at the tree that comes expressed. So there's a midrash, a famous rabbinic text, that is stakel b'oraisa bar alma, that God used the Torah, spiritual wisdom, to create the physical world, which means that the physical world isn't just a creation, it's literally an expression of the spiritual. So if you learn quantum mechanics and physics and biology and psychology, and you learn about the physical world, the physical wisdom, that's an expression of something infinitely higher, which means that the natural is actually an expression of something.
You lost some internet, Rabbi. I'm going to wait till you recover it. Yeah, you lost some internet.
Okay.
Still not recovered, so save your best thoughts.
1 second. Okay, let me know when we're back, because I think the internet connection should be back on.
I mean, can you see me?
I can see you fine.
I'm like live, okay.
Yeah.
You are like a little robotic, like strobe light type thing. Okay, now. Yeah, I think you're okay now. I'll let you know if it happens again.
Okay. Okay. So basically, the point is that the physical becomes an expression of the spiritual, and then what ends up happening is something amazing. What ends up happening is that you can essentially go both ways. You can go from the root to the expression, or from the expression to the root. So Avraham, he didn't have the Torah. Right? He went from this world and said, where did everything come from? Like, why am I here? What's the purpose of everything? Everything seems to come from something else. Everything seems to have its source. So what's the source of me? What's the source of the world? And he went back to the root, right? From the expression back to the root, and he found God from the physical world. Solomon, he was given the root. He was given Torah wisdom. And from that, he was able to understand the expression. He was able to understand the world. So the truth is that when it comes to the path, the only path, there's no one path towards the truth. What makes Torah unique is that, and this is a much, much longer conversation, is that it's not a limited wisdom. It's not a form of wisdom. It's the source of all wisdom. It's essentially, as opposed to getting a piece of the puzzle, you get the whole puzzle. And it's a very interesting thing that Judaism is not a proselyting, we don't go out and try to convince people to come and become Jews.
Right.
Because in terms of rabbinic thought, there is a Masorah tradition that God originally offered the Torah to everyone, and only the Jewish people accepted. And at the time of the original giving of the Torah, anyone could have joined, but everyone said we don't want to give up this, we don't want to give up that, because if you break it down, Torah is a life of truth, it's also a life of responsibility. And it's difficult. It means that you have to live within the boundaries of reality as opposed to doing whatever it is that you want. And even though real happiness and real joy comes from living a life of truth, it doesn't mean it's easy. And it doesn't mean that everyone will be able to fully understand that to the point where they're willing to give up a lot of the things that they have to give up to live a life of truth. So the point is that we don't say you have to live a Torah life, to live a life of truth, we say that Torah is the ultimate truth, which is the idea of Shef Mitzvah Bnei Noach, that people who are not Jewish can still live within the framework of Torah truth. And even though they're not committing to the whole truth, they're not accepting all the mitzvahs, all the commandments, they're still living within the basic alignment of living a life of purpose and meaning, and living within a higher sense of there is something more to this world.
So the bridge to the ultimate self is through pretty much keeping Torah values if you're not Jewish, and keeping the Torah if you are Jewish. Correct?
So that's where it actually gets, like, if we're really going to take this to the full extent, it gets interesting, because it could be that for a non-Jew, their ultimate self is living a life as a non-Jew within the ultimate values of truth, without the specific details of the mitzvahs and the commandments of Torah. And that is basically like an interesting question of, we talk about Jews learn Kol Torah Kula in the womb. We learn all of Torah. Like, right. What do non-Jews learn in the womb? Like, that's a real question.
Is there an answer? That's interesting.
So I've asked that. One of the answers could be, the Shla Kadosh, a very famous Jewish thinker, said that every non-Jew who converts, they were actually one of the original non-Jews who wanted to accept the Torah back at Sinai, back at Har Sinai, but as a nation, their nation basically said, no, there's a deep tradition that every soul was at Har Sinai, not just the people who were alive at that time, everyone who would ever be born, which means that, you and I, everyone who will ultimately come out of the Jewish nation was at Har Sinai. But if you take that logic to the same extent, every non-Jew was also there being offered the Torah, and every non-Jew said no. But there are non-Jews who convert. So What about them? So the Shla said that every non-Jew who converts, like, they were one of the individuals who, even though as a nation, the nations didn't want to come in and join, as an individual, they did want to. So that's why there's, like, when it comes to people who have converted, I know plenty of them, I'm sure you know plenty of them as well, there's this yearning within them. They want more. Like, they've always been on some sort of journey, or something woke them up that they, like, deeply, deeply want more. So this is a powerful psychological perspective, which is that you literally want more. Like, you are, like, you've always wanted to be.
Their enthusiasm is enviable even.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd like to see some Jews have such a passion. I have a lot of questions. So, and they're all deep, and I think they will cover a lot of things that you would like to say. So can we try?
For sure.
And if I miss something and you need to insert whatever, go ahead and you'll have the chance to do it, okay?
Sure.
Okay, I want to, like, completely jump to another world and ask you why you, since everything's in the womb and you have all your knowledge and your mission is given to you at that time. We also know in Judaism that a person's name reflects an essence of who they are. So I want to know why you were named Shmuel. Who were you named after? If you could tell me a little bit about that.
For sure. So I was named after my great-grandparents. And I come from a family of people who were very, very special in their own ways. And it's actually funny, my middle name is David. So Shmuel anointed David as
right, that's what I was going to say. Shmuel's a kingmaker.
So yes, I guess I appointed myself as my role. But the name is a very, very deep essence. And it's actually funny. I used to go by Shmoli as a kid. And as I started to learn more, I started to really connect to the name Shmuel. And anyone who's gone through transitions, it's hard to change your name when everyone knows you by one name. But I really, really connected to the name Shmuel. Everyone, that's really the deepest concept when it comes to Hebrew, is that a name is of essence, a word is of essence. So if you break down anything into its fundamental components, you can really, gain a lot of insight into it, which is, a powerful form of self-reflection. So that's actually, I don't do this all the time, but you can really take a moment to gain self-awareness by thinking about who you're named after, thinking about the name itself in terms of, like, biblically who your name is, and really thinking about that person and thinking about where your kochos, where your strengths align. So I've never actually been asked that before, but it's an interesting
I did see it in you, because what you do is you try and help people have self-mastery, so you become the king of your own kingdom, and Shmuel was a kingmaker. He ordained Shaul and David. So You're kind of in line.
I mean, the most powerful concept of kingship is someone who, on the surface level, seems to have, strength and power and seems to be representing greatness, but is actually egoless and reflecting something infinitely greater than themselves. So a real king, and like we live in a Western world where monarchy and kingship has been absolutely, has failed in every regard possible. We view democracy as the highest ideal, which is always a question, because if in Torah, monarchy and kingship seems to be an ideal, but in the Western world, like it's a reflection of absolute dominance, evil and tyranny. Yeah. Like what's it? So there's two different types of kingship. One is kingship where the king essentially serves himself, reflects himself, and everyone in the kingdom serves him or her. And the real goal is self-service. So it's basically control, as opposed to the Jewish concept of kingship, which is reflection. So the king is essentially malchus, without getting into the deeper Jewish concepts here. The concept of being a king is that your goal is to reflect Hashem into this world. So you're supposed to embody and reflect, godly characteristics and serve as a spiritual role model for the nation. But then again, your goal is to connect the nation not to yourself, but connect them to Hashem. So you serve as the intermediary, which is a powerful and really a fundamentally different way of viewing the purpose of being a king, which is not to hold power and to control, but to reflect and reveal, a higher reality.
Okay. So I know that your grandfather was a scholar, and you spoke that you come from great people, and I read about that. So I see the influence he had on you. He was a teacher at YU. He was an expert in Josephus. Am I correct? Yes. Okay. Yes. And your grandmother, though, was a Holocaust survivor, and you dedicate the book to them, and it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. What influence did your grandmother, being a Holocaust survivor, have on you?
So that's a good question. So they're actually just recently shared something about this. There are different types of Holocaust survivors. There are some that talk about it all the time. There's some that don't really talk about it. So my grandmother was in Auschwitz, and she and her sisters actually escaped on one of the death marches afterwards. And she really didn't talk about it often. She lost so much of her family in the Holocaust. And I grew up with, we're the descendants of Holocaust survivors, and every single piece of food is valuable. Every penny is valuable. Don't waste anything. And my mother was the daughter of a Holocaust survivor. And I remember the first time that my grandmother really talked about it was when I had to write a book report in elementary school. And my mother kind of like set up a little bit of an interview, but like in a very careful way, because my grandmother really, really didn't like to talk about it. Her sister, one of her sisters, talked about it all the time. She was like the happiest, most loving person who just like would talk about it openly to whoever, whenever. And like people respond to the tragedy and the real horror of that experience in different ways. And for me, when I was 18, I visited Poland, and I remember I visited Auschwitz, and I was really at the stage in my life where I was still finding out who I was, still trying to figure out my past, still really trying to clarify what I want to do with my life. And I remember being so overwhelmed with a combination of like anger and like, how could this happen? And the horrors. I was learning about everything that was actually happening day to day in Auschwitz, what my grandmother was going through. And I remember on the bus ride back, like I was crying a little bit, and I was so angry, and I was so upset, but I was also so inspired. And I said that if my grandmother was going to survive this absolute hell and the horrors of what the Nazis did, then I'm going to devote my life to making sure there was a reason for that. And I'm going to devote my life to really actualizing my potential, making my impact on the world and inspiring others. Because my grandfather, who was incredible, the scholar Josephus, he used to say that, like, everything that we do with our lives is a posthumous victory over Hitler. And it's a powerful way of approaching life, that like, the fact that every single Jewish neshama that's here is basically saying that he failed, like that's step one. But what are we going to do with the life that we have? That's step number two. So a lot of the inspiration, like I started writing and I started speaking and all that stuff that came after, like it's dedicated to my grandparents, but like she really definitely inspired a lot of the passion to actualize the potential to make a difference and to say, like, we're here. That's step number one. Like my grandmother survived, but what are we going to do with the time that we have left?
what would you say is the greatest, if you would have to just say one greatest life lesson that you learned from your parents that you feel like you have to conduct yourself that way? And what's the one thing that you really want your son's name is Yosef?
Yosef, yeah.
What do you want Yosef to know for sure? If there's one thing you told Yosef in your lifetime, that's something he should know.
That's such a good question. Both good questions. I'll split it up between my father and my mother. So my mother is such a balat chesed. She does so much kindness. She's really just such a loving, caring person, helping so many people. And my father himself, like, he's a doctor. He practices emergency medicine, and he loves medical halacha, Jewish medical ethics, and he teaches. And as a kid, Baruch Hashem, I have so many role models. I have so many people who've influenced me. But my father was so busy and was so passionately working on so many projects, but he always had time for us. He's someone that a lot of people will say, like, oh my gosh, that's your father. He's the most amazing person ever. And for me, it's like, he's the most amazing person ever. He's also the most amazing father.
I saw on Facebook you wrote how you should never let anything come before your family time.
Yeah, so I definitely learned that from him. Okay. Definitely learned that from him. And it's so powerful because once you start to gain responsibility and you have a real sense of passion and purpose, you're trying to make a difference, it's so easy to just lose your value system and like forget what's really important and, kind of push your family aside and focus on your writing and your impact and your success. But like my father really taught me that, but also like my father really was my Rebbe. My father was my teacher. He really taught me so much about life. He taught me so much Torah. He taught me really what it means to live a life of happiness. And he's like, when I was 17, I thought, who's the happiest person I've ever met? And like, without a question for me, like my father came up, like he was the happiest person always. He's also from the Midwest. He's a Midwesterner, which kind of helps. But that was so many things, hard to really crystallize into one takeaway lesson. But in terms of Yosef, like right now he's one. And I won't say there's one thing that I've said that's really going to change his life.
No, but in your mind, I'm going to teach you this.
In my mind, I've always said that my goal as a father is to really be there to help him become everything that he's really capable of becoming. So not to enforce a certain path and say, you have to do this, and this is the only thing that needs success, but really help him find his path, find his uniqueness, find who he really is, and help him become the greatest version of himself. And I think that's the greatest, like, there's basically two parts. There's a mitzvah of pruruvu, which is to have children. So some of the Jewish, the scholars and thinkers and legal thinkers say there's really two parts of that mitzvah. It's not just to have children. It's also to help, to basically be their Rebbe, to be their teacher, and help them actualize their potential. Now, a lot of parents, they hire rebbeim, they hire teachers to do that for them. That's definitely okay. But that doesn't mean it's still not their responsibility. And for me, like, my role as a father is not just to kind of pay the bills and send them to school, but like, I want to help him become everything that he's capable of becoming, and to serve as, like, obviously I'm going to learn this as I go. We're just getting started. Right. But it's really to be there for what he needs to really help him become who he's capable of becoming.
How many years are you married?
Married for about 4 years.
4 years. Okay. Beautiful wife. Also saw the pictures on Facebook. So going back to the self-help world and the life we're all living now, it seems that the world at large is not happy, wanting more. And evidence of that is the self-help market, which globally in 2021 was $48 billion. Yeah. So that could be looked at in many ways. What do you feel about the desire for more, to be better, to do better, or is it indicative of poor self-esteem? I mean, what does that number reflect to you? And also a follow-up question, maybe you could just throw it into the soup, is has the outlook or our opinions about self-help changed? Because I remember when we used to watch movies in the olden days or just see people say affirmations, we kind of laugh at them, I am great, it's like ridiculous. But today it's so much more accepted. So all that being out there, what do you have to say on this whole subject?
So it's a really, really good question. And I think it's indicative of a couple of things. First of all, it shows that there's such an underlying drive and desire within us as human beings. Like, we want to feel fulfilled. We want to be happy. We want to feel like we're growing. We want to feel like we're becoming. We want to solve our problems. We want to figure out what's going to help us succeed. And I think the underlying truth behind all that is that the purpose of life is to grow. The purpose of life is to self-actualize, to fulfill your purpose, to become. And everyone is seeking that, whether they know it or not. So everyone wants to be happy. Some people think money is going to make them happy. Some people think fame is going to make them happy. Some people think that getting married to an amazing person is going to make them happy. Some people think like eating great foods and going on adventures is going to make you happy. When you realize that, first of all, you'll never be happy because you'll never get there. It's a journey. And that the very nature of happiness is something that you experience while you are becoming. So I'll have people who, for example, will spend months trying to make a big deal. And they'll finally get the deal done, and they'll be happy for maybe a couple of days, maybe a week. And then they're like, okay, like I got to go on to the next deal. And why is that? It's profound. It's because we don't want to have accomplished. We want to accomplish. We don't want to have grown. We want to grow. So a lot of people, they want to be at the destination. They want to finish, right? They want to be in great physical shape, have spiritual connection. They want to feel intellectually great. They want to feel like they have great relationships. They have financial success, but they want to be there. So first of all, they don't want to do the work, but they don't think they're going to be happy until they get there. And then once they finally get there, they realize that I'm not happy. I must want something else, right? So then they go on to the next thing. And it's like a great story I like to share of a guy who's climbing a mountain, and a guy in a helicopter comes by and says, "Where are you going?" And he says, "Oh, I'm climbing up this mountain." So he says, "I'm actually going that direction. You want to hop onto the helicopter? I'll take you there." So the guy says, "No, you understand. I don't want to be on top of the mountain. I want to climb." And it's a powerful way of approaching. If you don't want to be brilliant, but you want to learn, you don't want to have a perfect marriage, you want to work on your marriage. You don't want to be, in tip-top perfect shape. You want to work out and get in better shape. You don't want to be successful. You want to become successful. You don't want to know everything. You want to learn everything. You realize that the essence of being human is to become. It's to grow. It's process. It's movement. It's progress. And a lot of people, they really... They don't enjoy the journey. And if you can learn how to enjoy the journey, your entire life changes. Because then, as opposed to everything in your life being miserable, because like, when will I finally have this? When will I finally be there? Your entire life is amazing. It's for people who enjoy running, for people who enjoy reading and learning, people who enjoy building relationships and business. They're the ones who love what they do. But right. The people who are waiting for everything to finish, their entire life is a waiting game. And then it's like, oh,
and it's very stressful too, because everything you do along the way kind of it's nothing. It's meaningless. It's torture. It's painful. It's all about the destination and not the journey.
Exactly. And by the way, it's not only about the journey. Like you need a destination. Like that gives you a direction. It gives you a target. It's like
I have to interrupt here because the way you started the book with a story, a great story, a gripping story, you want more. And then you stop.
Yeah.
So please continue. Why did you stop along that theme?
That's the reason why I stopped is because, and just to give people a sense of what you're talking about, basically the entire book starts off with an introductory story and it stops and it doesn't acknowledge the stop and goes right into a transition. And like everyone basically forgets, but in the back of their mind is thinking like, what in the world's going on? Like, why would we stop? And the reason why is because that should basically make you think there's something wrong with a story that starts and doesn't go somewhere. Like every story needs to have a direction, needs to have a destination. And that's basically where everyone finds themselves in life when they listen to, if they're reading a story or they're right now, is that you're in the middle of your story. You were born somewhere, you were born in a certain environment with certain genetics into a certain family, and you had certain experiences, and you're now going on this incredible story, and you're at the point in your story where you are. And no story is a story without going towards an incredible destination. And what Hashem wants us to do is to write the rest of our story, is to pick up the pen and say, why not turn this into the most incredible story of all time? And by the way, like when you read a novel, you watch a film, it's like the person goes on this incredible quest. Maybe their life falls apart. Maybe they don't feel special. And then they realize they can do amazing things and they start to grow. And then there's the, exercise montage where they're like, they're finally getting momentum. Things are going well. And then they start to succeed. And then there's a climactic ending. Like, we all deep down want that story. We all deep down want to go on an incredible journey, to feel like our life is meaningful, to build great relationships, to feel like we're actually here for a purpose. And the fundamental nature of that story is that it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be meaningful. You're going to have to overcome challenge, but it's going to be worth it. And you're going to go to an incredible destination. And if you view yourself as the hero of your story, which is that, why else? Like, what else is there to do in this world besides for literally see what you're capable of becoming and try to live the most meaningful, extraordinary life imaginable? And to go on that story, like, yes, there are parts of that hero story where nothing's going right, where that person feels like they're not destined for greatness, where that person feels like everything's going wrong. And whether it's health difficulties or financial struggles or relationships falling apart or lack of self-esteem and no confidence, that's why, to come full circle to the self-help, self-development, it gives you hope that maybe I can become more, that maybe life can get better. And then it's really a question like this. Nothing's going to change until you change. So no self-development idea is going to change your life unless you do the work. So you can learn the ideas, the inspiration behind what you could do to get your life in order to achieve that next level, whether it's, in really any area of your life. But when it comes to building muscle, you have to literally have resistance. You have to rip the muscle fibers apart in order to grow muscle. It's the same thing for intellectual growth. It's the same thing to build a relationship. You have to have difficult conversations. It's the same thing for spiritual growth. You have to really develop more self-awareness. It's the same thing for financial growth. You have to develop more skills, have a greater impact, share more value with the world. So is it easy? No. But is it worth it? 100%. Because the moment that you go on that path, you start living an amazing life, because then it's like, wow, like my life is meaningful. Like, I know why I'm doing this. And like, if I don't know why I'm doing it, I'm not going to put in this amount of work. It's not enough just to kind of get by. That's not going to drive me. I have to really feel. So
what stops people, Rabbi? What stops people? I mean, people want to be happy. They want their goals. And yet, what do they say, that the road to success is not as busy as the parking lot beside it? So why do people pull over and stop?
So that's a question that I spent years just really thinking about, because if you, like, anyone who hears, like, and I guarantee that 99% of people have heard what we've shared before, like at least aspects of it. Like, no one's ever like been surprised by the idea that life could be great, that life could be amazing, that you could accomplish great things, you could live a life of happiness and meaning and purpose. So I was really trying to figure out, like, what stops people? Like, why are there just some people that are born different? Are they just like better? Are they more capable? Or they have, better families, better genetics? They have better systems of thought? Do they have opportunities? Like, and I think it comes down to a couple things. Like, first of all, a lot of people, they never even get started.
Okay.
Right? They're scared that maybe they'll fail. They're scared that maybe people will think they're weird, or think they, oh, you think you're better than us? Right? If someone starts to give up unhealthy foods and starts to take their time seriously and starts to read and learn and grow, they might also start cutting off some negative people out of their life. And if they start doing that, maybe they're afraid that people will start saying, oh, you think you're so good, you think you're better than us, you think that you're special, you think that you're... So a lot of people will stay where they are because they're afraid of what people will think. They're also afraid that what if they try really hard and they fail, people will make fun of them. People will think like, oh, like, serves you right, you think you're so special. Going, a lot of people, they're scared that maybe they're not good enough, maybe they're not worthy, maybe for example, a lot of people, they're scared to give up the comfort of where they are. If you want to get in good physical shape, you're going to have to sacrifice certain delicious foods, you're going to have to exercise, you're going to have to sleep better. When it comes to any form of growth, you just take that exact paradigm. When it comes to spiritual growth, you have to give up things. When it comes to intellectual growth, you have to really struggle through it. When it comes to building amazing relationships, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to be seen. You have to also really struggle and work on building the relationship. When it comes to financial success, it takes a lot of effort. You're going to fail a lot. You're going to have to basically get out of your comfort zone. You're going to have to make uncomfortable phone calls. You're going to have to network. You're going to have to meet people. You're going to have to share. You're going to have to. So there's so much holding people back. So the real question then becomes, if there's so much holding people back, how are some people able to do it? Right? You flip the question the opposite way.
Right.
And then the answer becomes, the only way to do it is when you cannot but do it. When you so deeply want this, when it's literally all you think about, when it's all you care about, when you're so driven. So for people who are so passionate about something, whether it's art or music or ideas or wisdom or spirituality or their business or their relationships, when it's all you think about, when you care about it, when you know why you're doing it. There's a great line: anyone who has a powerful enough why can overcome any how. So there will be so many questions of how are you going to succeed. But when you have a deep enough purpose, a reason, motivation, a drive, it's like no matter what happens, you're going to figure out a way to breathe, because you need to breathe to survive. So when this area of your life becomes so much part of your identity that I need it. Like I need to figure out a way of sharing my music or sharing these ideas or making this impact or building my marriage or finding the person that I'm going to marry. Or like when that becomes so important to you that you'll do whatever it takes, then you'll do whatever it takes.
You'll do whatever it takes. Okay, a few questions that I think are important. We're living through dark times, and people, even religious people, find it hard to have faith. I mean, you have your moments of, I have my faith in Hashem, and then you like do everything possible to fix the problem, and you stress, but you just say you have faith. But so what is really faith, and how do we get more of it? Because I think we need it in a big dose. It's either that or vodka. So please tell me how to have more faith.
So I think faith itself needs to be really deepened in order to appreciate it, because faith can be seen as literally irrational and dumb. Like if you're a scientist and you're a rational thinker, what does faith mean? Faith, if you look in the dictionary, faith means believing in something that's basically unprovable and that no one knows if it's true. So you want to think, is that what we mean by having faith? Do we not know if God exists and we're just believing in him? So I think there's two fundamental things to talk about. Number one is that the Hebrew word emunah, which it translates as faith, it doesn't mean faith. Emunah, if you look at the way it's used in the Torah, it means like Abraham is referred to by God as an ish ne'eman. So this is like they've been talking, they have a relationship. Abraham doesn't believe, he doesn't have faith that God exists. So why is God calling him an ish ne'eman? So the way that the Rambam, the way that Maimonides and other thinkers talk about emunah is that emunah is to be faithful. So for example, you might know that it's unhealthy to eat a donut and to eat ice cream, but you still do it, right? Meaning you're not faithful to that knowledge. So I might know that everything is for the best. I might know that I'm supposed to live a life devoted to God, but it's not going to be easy. So the real struggle in life is being faithful to what you believe in. Having values, saying this is what I want to live my life in alignment with. I want to be a good person. I want to be growing. I want to live a life of Torah mitzvahs, or I want to live a life of morality, live an ethical life, live a meaningful life. But it's nice to want that. Everyone wants those things. It's another thing to actually do it. And to live a life in alignment and being faithful to what you believe in is a truly difficult but extraordinary type of life to live. And then to deepen the discussion of faith, I think it's good to kind of build a couple different categories of faith. So when it comes to your connection with God, when it comes to believing in God, let's say someone's born into a Jewish family, right? They're born and they're from, they, kind of keep Torah mitzvahs, they keep Shabbos, they keep kosher, and they're 4 or 5 years old and they're told that God exists, and they're like, yeah, God exists, everything that, and then you kind of like start to develop yourself. So you develop and you're 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And then you start to say, that's not enough, but I start to see God in my life, right? I missed the bus and the bus got into an accident. So if I would have been on that bus, I would have been really hurt. Maybe I would have died. So I see divine providence in my life. I see what we call hashgacha pratis. I see where God, for let's say people who are supposed to go to work on 9/11 and they didn't go to work. So like those are incredible, and everyone to their own degree. Let's say you meet the love of your life because you happen to go there, or you went to make a wrong turn and you got a job opportunity. Like you see these like incredible things, and it's like a very personal, emotional connection with God that a philosopher or scientist would say you're just fooling yourself. Like that's not a proof that God exists. That's just you choosing to see the things that happen in your life as from God, but it's still a very deep personal experiential connection with God because you are finding God in your life. That's your faith, that's your experience. But then you start to go to, you're 17, you're 18, you're 20, 25, and you say, I want more. I want to really, like, does God actually exist? I want to prove it. So you start to have philosophical proofs. You say everything in the world has a source. I mean, I come from my parents come from their parents, this comes from this, the milk comes from the cow. Where does the world come from? Okay, so it comes from Big Bang. Where does the Big Bang come from? Well, like, where does everything come from? So it must be that the world has a creator. Or you focus on a different proof. You say, the world is so beautiful, it's so majestic, it's designed, you learn chemistry and biology, the world literally is so artistically, beautifully organized. This can't be random. It can't just be an evolutionary accident. It must be that someone designed it. It must be that there's a creator. So you start to develop philosophical proofs. But then you start to say, I want more. So then you go into a deeper realm of connection with God. You say, there's types of experience that transcends reason. So for example, how do you know you're not sleeping right now? Right? When you're sleeping, you think you're awake. How do you know you're not sleeping right now? How do you know
it's recording? That I'm live.
How do you know you weren't created 20 minutes ago with all of your memories in place?
Right.
How do you know that your parents are your parents? How do you know? So how do you know that your life has meaning and purpose? How do you know that you're unique? How do you know that there's like a real sense of love and not just a chemical, evolutionary advantage of having children? How do you know that there's something really, the concept of beauty, without it just being a bunch of physical, like what makes something beautiful? Like these things which you experience so deeply, the fact that you have free will. How do you know you have free will? How do you know you're not just input output, that all of your decisions are just a result of your genetics and the experiences that you've had? These are things that you know so deeply, but you can't prove. You can't prove you're awake. But this is the classic philosophical question. How do you know you exist? And philosophically, you can't prove that you exist because you can't create a control outside of existence to prove that you are existing.
If it wouldn't be for the IRS, I would even doubt it sometimes.
So the point is that these questions get to the very depth of human existence and experience, and you know them so deeply because you're aware of them, but you can't prove them. They're not rationally, logically, or philosophically provable. They're something that you experience deeply and know without needing to prove them. And that is a type of connection to God that is so much deeper. It's the same way that you experience your existence. I think, therefore I am, as Descartes famously said. So to experience your connection with God, not as this just random faith of I believe, even though it's like just a random choice that I could choose not to believe, but something that I so deeply am connected with, the same way that I don't have faith that I exist. I know that I exist, and I deeply experience this more than just a rational belief. So to strive to have that type of connection with Hashem, with God, is so much more meaningful, deep, and intimate than a lot of people who have like this idea that God is an idea or God's a concept. God is some, you start with like God is some giant bearded man in the sky. You say, no, God's an idea. He's a concept. He's the root of existence. But to add layers of the depth of your connection with God, the same way that you'd want to deepen a relationship, you deepen a relationship with a colleague, then deepen the relationship with your spouse. And when you meet your spouse, you don't know each other, and then you build a deeper relationship, deepen, more intimate, build a family. That's what your relationship with yourself should also be like, in terms of getting more self-aware, getting to know yourself more, thinking about how you think, how you work. And that's also the relationship we should be building with God, and building a deeper and deeper relationship, recognizing the distance. Like it's important to have that distance of God's infinitely beyond, but he's also deeply manifest. And that itself is an answer to how to build more faith in times of darkness. like whenever there's a deeper internal mindset, belief system, internal reality, that's how you experience whatever darkness is happening in the world or in your life. The more meaning you give to your challenges, the more you're able to cope and realize, in terms of the best advice. Viktor Frankl was very famous for all of his research on how did the Jews in the Holocaust overcome those horrors. If you build a deep enough meaning and you build a deep enough internal system of I'm capable of growing through this, of getting through this, you're able to turn anything that happens into something basically more meaningful and uplifted.
Right.
The more that you're connected with God internally, the more you'll also be able to do that. So it actually goes hand in hand in terms of how to deal with the darkness of life.
Okay. You write in your book, and we'll end here, that the place where the most treasures are, the richest place, is the graveyard. Now, I want to know how your mastery course can help us take out all those treasures that are in the graveyard or make sure that they're not buried there. So please tell me about your mastery course and what it can do for us.
Of course. So yes, the line is one of my favorite lines, is that the wealthiest place in the world is not the diamond mines or the banks, it's the graveyard, because in the graveyard you'll find endless ideas that weren't acted upon, endless potential that wasn't actualized, inspiration, business ideas, books, relationships, all these things that we could have done, but essentially went to the grave with the people who died without acting on that inspiration, acting on that potential. And the goal of my life has always been to really try and actualize my own potential and help as many people as I can do the same. And the goal of the book that we've been talking about is really the Torah principles, the Torah foundation of building an internal philosophy, an internal system of thought, and really connecting to the deeper wisdom of Torah that helps you live that type of life and actualize your potential. But again, the book is very theoretical, philosophical, esoteric. It's deep. Every chapter has action points, which help you apply and implement the ideas. But the goal is still the Torah foundation. The self-mastery course is really designed to be the practical side of this equation. So it helps you not only learn the ideas, but really learn how to apply them. So in terms of building a stronger identity, overcoming fear, building confidence, understanding how to build the right types of relationships and create an ideal environment, how to create the right types of goals, how to harness willpower and how to overcome struggle, how to build the type of paradigms and mindset so that you can really live the type of life, whether it's finding your career path, building incredible marriages, whether it's getting in good physical shape, getting more internal confidence, whatever your specific goals are. That's why we've had literally so many different types of people go through the course. We've had CEOs and entrepreneurs and business leaders take the course. We've had people in the Jewish leadership world, people who are mechanchim, they're Jewish educators. We've had parents take it together. We've had teenagers take it.
I've seen your testimonials. People are really praising you, and that's really great, but keep going.
But the goal of the course is really for you to plug yourself in and for you to literally figure out how to take your life to the next level. So there are people who are starting out in life, they're really just trying to build self-awareness and figure out who they are, what they're supposed to be doing. But then there are people who are well on the path, but they've lost the motivation and drive, or they want to take things to the next level, or they've stopped progress, they've stopped the momentum. They really can't figure out how to get over their mental struggles and their inner doubts and their inner fears, and they can't build the consistency. They don't really want it enough. So the course is designed to help everyone become the best that they can become from wherever they are. And it's principle-based. So even though it's based on Torah, it's not really, there's no Torah mentioned in the sense that it's not designed to be lectures on Torah. It's designed to be self-development, high-performance psychology based on Torah principles and values. And every single video has a worksheet that's basically designed to help you implement the ideas. So everyone can go to, and this is why I love coaching, because I get to help people personalize and implement their growth. But you can hear the generic ideas. This is what I can do to overcome fear. This is how I can build more confidence. This is how I can gain more self-awareness and build my identity. This is how I can get more goal-oriented and actually follow through on my goals. But the worksheets help you really concretize and say, okay, this is what I'm struggling with. This is what I want to do. This is my plan. These are the habits I'm going to work on. So concretizing inspiration and actually following through on your commitments is where growth happens. And when you can build the habits and you can be consistent, you can go from learning about what life could be to actually living it.
Right.
So
it's like building a reputation for yourself, like that you can rely on yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Giving yourself the reputation internally that I'm the type of person who is capable of following through, of committing, of showing up. And once you start to respect yourself, it follows through in how you live. Once you start to say, like, a lot of people that have this voice in their head that says you can't do it. Like, you're not good enough. Like, you're a failure. Like, you always mess up. You always give up. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more you tell yourself that, the more you do it, which is why even though you want to build it from the ground up with a very strong foundation, sometimes you do need to fake it till you make it. Like, sometimes you need to literally tell yourself, I can do this, even though in the back of your mind, you're like, I can't. You're like, be quiet. I can't. And you show up, you give it your all. You're like, wow. Like, I never thought I could do that. Like, that was amazing. Like, that was the best pitch I ever gave in my work, or the best speech I ever gave, or that was the best date I ever had, or that was the best workout I've ever had. And I was like, wow, like, what have I been holding myself back from? Because the first time you overcome a real fear, you're like, I've been living with that fear for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And like, it was all in my mind. Like, I was able to do it the entire time. And then you're like, what else could I do?
That's
and
great.
then it's like step by step.
Yeah, like you have really an old soul. Your wisdom is just beyond. And if your mastery course is anything like your book, then I highly recommend it. It's a terrific book. It's really great. I had a PDF file of it, and it just wasn't good enough. I needed to have this book on my shelf with my Sfarim. This is a great book. That. Are you courageous enough to play some piano for us back there?
Right now, I've never ever played music on an interview or podcast or one of these things, but you are courageous enough to ask, so I'll be courageous enough to play.
Thank you, Rabbi, and it's been a pleasure to interview you, even though you turn your back to me.
Only because you asked.
I know, I'm just joking.